I recall pretty vividly at least a couple of auditions. I recall getting the part, and I recall some of the complications it was for my family to move to Los Angeles for a while. I recall very vividly signing the contract because it was an enormous stack of papers. But yeah, I think I remember the audition process very well because Ann Beatts was so involved. She cared a lot more than any number of people who you might audition for. And Eve Branstein, who was the casting director, they had a very maternal approach to the process, and I'm sure not just with me, but with all the young actors that were auditioning. And you got to read a lot of scenes. You didn't just read, a small portion of a scene. And Eve did take off her glasses and put them on me to see what I would look like with glasses. And I don't recall the details, but I recall really liking them and, just noting that they were smart and funny, both of them together. And at the time in New York, it was at a hotel room. I think there were very few other people involved in the audition process besides Ann and Eve at that point, early on. My mother and my two baby siblings, Erin and Allegra, who are now 30 and she's just shy of 30. Allegra has a 6-year-old son. Allegra has a son who is older now than she was then. And my mother came, of course, because the child labor laws were different in Southern California than in New York. In New York at that time, no one was enforcing child labor laws. You could work a child, any number of indecent hours. And in Los Angeles, as you and many of us recall, we were able to work a certain amount of hours. We had to complete our schoolwork. We had to rap at certain times. So my mother was there, and it was very odd for both of us because I had never spent that much time with my mother. And I was 16, and really the last person that I really wanted to spend that much time with was my mother. And I'm sure she felt the same way about spending enormous hours with her 16-year-old daughter. And we had to drive great distances to Norwalk, California every morning, and she wanted to listen to NPR every morning, and I wanted to listen to K-Rock every morning. And my siblings had to be dropped off at school. We found a Montessori school in Norwalk, and it was an upheaval for my family, and probably just, yet another sacrifice that my mother made for me. I really don't feel any resentment or disappointment about the choices that I made as a young person that kept me from living a life that is a more expected life for an adolescent. I feel really, on the contrary, really lucky because I wasn't a great student. I didn't have an academic calling. I wasn't terrifically social in high school. I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't fit in well. I felt very different because I had been out of school so much as a working actor. So for me, Square Pegs, never mind professionally all the satisfaction that came from it and being part of something that I thought was very special, but it was an escape from, the humdrum rigors of public high school. And I liked the kind of responsibilities that I had that were expected of all of us on the show, and what a burden it was on us, especially myself and Amy, because we were there every day working. I loved those kind of burdens. I had grown accustomed to them, and I just feel that I benefited from being a working actor for so many years. I mean, the things that I can't do, the deficits in my life are really about, like, I don't really know how to write a term paper properly or organize my thoughts on paper, or, I don't have any great sense of the order of history. I didn't get to study any number of things that you do in high school or college with any great dedication. But as an adult, I like to learn on my own anyway, maybe because I didn't so much. I mean, I always, I did things that were of interest to me. I seemed to do better at, but I preferred acting, And I don't know why or what my own pathology is, but I don't know, I feel lucky that people around me allowed my life to be that, you know, that I wasn't forced to do things that I didn't feel good about. I don't think it's the answer for most children, but for me and for my family, it worked out all right. I didn't relate to her intellectual prowess because I just thought she was much more applied in school, and she had discipline in areas that I just didn't. But I really, really liked her, and I really admired her, and she was sort of the kind of person that I wished I could be, or would hope to be, or even aspire to be, because she was so bright and she was so principled about who she was. Even though she was seduced temporarily by trends or fads or this desire to be part of a larger group, her innate, authentic person was, just wait till I get to college, then I'll find the interesting people like myself. And she really didn't fall as much victim to a lot of the the landmines that exist for adolescents trying to fit in. I mean, I think she thought she should she thought she should want to be like everybody else, and there were moments that were real pangs of that desire, but she was very, you know, both her character and Amy's character, Lauren, they were kind of unusual young women because they really were oddly comfortable in their oddness in a strange way. And maybe they were comforted by each other, I don't know. I have made the connection between, you know, from Patty Green to Carrie Bradshaw, and I have said it publicly on an occasion. I mean, I haven't, you know, made it a proclamation in any, but I've, you know, said it probably in interviews. And really, people have not always cottoned to that connection, but to me, I think it's kind of astounding that that I played that character then, who was her own person, you know, very much her own person, and with those aspirations of being a writer, and that Carrie Bradshaw is in many ways, you know, a destination point for Patty Green. Like, I don't think it's ridiculous. I don't think it's absurd. I think that Carrie Bradshaw really is not a popular girl. She wasn't, to me, she wasn't a popular girl, but she lives in a city that really cultivates the individual. She lives in New York City, and in New York City, being your own person is really what's valued. And Patty Green was in the wrong place. And so I see, you know, that might have become that person. You know, the values are a little bit skewered, but there's things about them that are striking. Well, I think everything about the show for 8 o'clock was really incredible, and I think that when I think back, you know, to the time, to other television around us, I see the beginnings of, you know, Cheers debuted the year that Square Pegs did, obviously to far greater success. But everything about the show, I think, was amazing because, number one, as you've said, two 16-year-old girls who were so verbal and so articulate and so intellectually curious about the world and so candid and odd, and, you know, weren't really blessed with the standards of beauty that at that time on television were really what people were longing to see and expecting to see and were encouraged to see and like. But I think the nature of the show itself, everything about it was just bold, you know, from the title song to, you know, the guest actors, to the way the kids spoke to each other, to the archetypes that Anne purposefully created and was very brave about. They weren't always likable, they weren't always good, decent people, they were superficial and self-centered, they were ridiculous, they were stupid on occasion, they were made fun of. nobody else had done that with young people. And really, I think if you look at the adolescence after that, you saw a lot of watered down versions of that. And that's not bad, it's not really a judgment, it's just what happened. And I thought at the time, when I started seeing other television shows that were about smart kids, bright kids, I thought, wow, you know, if it weren't for Anne, I don't think that show would have been on the air. Even Head of the Class, you know, which kind of dipped into that same well. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, that's the nature of our culture and television and movies. It was groundbreaking, definitely, and I think also it was completely resolved about itself. It was what it was. It obviously wasn't going to change to suit the network's desires. Anne wasn't going to change. You know, everybody around her, the creative staff, really believed in what they were doing, and the show speaks of that. It was really great to get to do, and just to show that real despondent teenage person being really just filled with despair and loneliness, to show what that's really like, and to talk about really not having a good relationship with a parent that disappoints you. You know, that's very truthful and very painful, and I don't know where that comes from in Anne's life, but or Janice or any of the people around her that were really great writers, and just thought it was great. It's funny because I guess the show Claire Danes did, but I can't remember what's it called, My So-Called Life. I'm realizing now, like, a smart girl who's thoughtful was good. It's good. Oh, Devo? I remember so well shooting those scenes for Muffy's bat mitzvah. Yeah, I remember very well. I couldn't believe it. My brother couldn't believe it. It wasn't really music that I ever really loved, but I because I listened especially to K-Rock all the time, and yeah, oh my God, Richard Blade! I couldn't believe it when he was on the show, and we listened to him in the morning driving to work, and it was amazing. And the waitresses singing our title song is crazy. But I felt very attached to people on that show, which is my nature. I think we all did. We were very young, and I think everything about the experience was so unusual that it felt like it hadn't been appreciated, and so it was personal, I think, to a lot of us. I remember being cast in Footloose, and finding out for sure that it wasn't going to be picked up, and I remember the director Herb Ross said, you know, that's a blessing, and I was so stunned because, you know, it wasn't his personal experience, and he was thinking, now you're not tied to a television series for the next, at that time it was a 7-year contract, and to me, I could, intellectually, I guess, understand his point was that, you can do lots of different things and your time is more your own. But for me, it was sad because I knew that the show was special. And I'll just finish by saying this one thing. My parents had been very anti-television. They didn't like television. I came of age in their era, jiggle television, that was really so deeply offensive to my mother. And it was either women in really tight, clothes and a lot of kind of basic vulgarity, or it was, archaic notions of women and role models that were really based in the 50s. And so television was like this forbidden fruit in our house, and we were only allowed to watch PBS and the Olympics. And so when I had in the past been offered a television series, my family would not let me do it. They forbid me to move to Los Angeles. They said I'd be ruined in Los Angeles, and I would give up everything that was meaningful, and I would, become a horrible person, and my values would be all screwed up. Not religious values, because they weren't, but just your basic moral compass. And Square Pegs was the exception to the pretty, hard, fast rule. And so when the show was canceled, I thought it was unfortunate for a number of reasons. First, because I think it was a great loss for Anne, and I felt that personally for Anne, and also I think because I knew that it was unique and special and that it was a loss for television, and it had been so well received critically, and you know, changed the way children, young adults, adolescents spoke. And I think a fresh voice is always important. A point of view that is different should have value, and I'm sorry it didn't.